Good morning. Going to be in Numbers chapter 14 today, and a little bit of a busy day. Well, every day's a little busy, but this will probably be shorter than normal. But I want to give you like maybe 5 quick thoughts. And to start with a story, a lot of you know the story of Chicken Little. Probably you don't know unless you're my age or older. But looking at Numbers chapter 14, I want to read you a verse. People, before I read the verse, when things go wrong, people panic. And one of the amazing things about emergency responders, police, firemen, and ambulance people, you're at the scene of an accident. There's blood and broken this and smashed that. People can keep their head. That's special. Everybody can't do that. Military, you're in a situation, the guy next to you is shot. Mentally, it's not physically, mentally being able to handle it. People typically, when there's trauma, a traumatic thing, they panic. You heard stories probably about the stock market crash. Everybody lost money, lost, the banks closed, money was gone. People were jumping out of building windows and killing themselves, and it's just amazing the things that panic will do to us. Now, you've heard me talk often about Hebrews. Lest we grow weary and faint in our minds. We faint up here. We panic up here. And so I want to, like Chicken Little, running around, the sky is falling. People panic. Something goes wrong in your home. I know a story. I don't know this person is secondhand, but it fits and it's funny. A guy's in Bible college days and working nights. He's hardly ever home, and his wife was home alone, nothing to do all day, all night, and I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just telling you the story. But he kept saying, you should do something. Don't watch TV so much. And he kept kind of getting on her, which is probably not the best way to be. But you're a Bible college kid. You're probably a newlywed. You don't have a brain in your head about marriage. But he came home one day and she was watching something on the TV, and he just kicked the TV and busted right through. In those days, it was a picture tube. Just busted right through that thing. Oh, that didn't make the marriage a happier place. And he overreacted. He panicked. He reacted in anger. But there'll be a problem, and people will go crazy and do stupid things, and they may run away. I know one couple, the husband was, I don't know, I'm not going to say I know what a good husband is, but he worked, paid the bills. The wife never had to punch a clock anywhere, and kids were in Christian school, tuition paid. They were always in church, never missed a church service, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and but she found out, poking around his computer, that he was gambling, going to the casino on the way home from work, and then found some pornography. And I don't know any of the details, and it's none of my business, but he came home from work, and she had everything that she called his in his pickup in the driveway. And she just said, no need to even come in the house because everything that's yours is right out there. And there was a time in the years that followed, she was homeless. Her and her kids had nowhere to live, and there was a lot of hurt. I'm not saying what he was doing was right. Anybody that knows me knows I preach purity and holiness, but how you react to it, there's maybe a more prudent way to respond to things that have gone wrong, and that might be the right way to react. Thinking it through and talking and trying to figure out a solution or whatever, and but this overreaction and we do tend to panic. We're humans, and we panic because we're angry, or we panic because we're scared. We find out there's a problem on the job and we'll run. Some kind of conflict at the church, we'll run, and it's not always the right thing. I want you to notice, and just let me give you 5 quick things out of Numbers chapter 14. Now, if you want to go back to chapter 13, that's where chapter 12, Korah and his group were in rebellion against Moses and saying, "Who do you think you are?" In chapter 12, there's the 12 spies, and they come. That's where we're not at Korah yet. I'm going back. They're at Kadesh Barnea, and the 12 spies are there, and they come back and they say, "Oh no, we'll never make it." And Joshua and Caleb said, "Oh yeah, we can do it. It'll be fine. God is with us." And the 10 said, "No, we can't." And the people heard the bad report, and they were so panicked over it. Look at verse 1 of chapter 14. All the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. So first of all, these people, bad news. They just fell apart. Bad news. Bad news in the newspaper, bad news in the TV, bad news in the podcast or the whatever it might be. They let it mess them up. They didn't think about God. They thought about their circumstances. So verse 2, and all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness." Now, I want to give you several quick points. Number one, they listened to the wrong people. 2 people said we could do it. 10 people said we can't do it. So they were listening to the wrong people. And I'll tell you, a lot of your discouragement, a lot of your worry, a lot of the panic, you've been paying attention to social media too much. People get paying attention to the TV too much, the news. If you're watching mainstream news, I mean, you turn the TV on, normal channels, and you're watching the news, you're being filled with lies. Now, you may be able to get news on some podcasts and some different things here and there and pick up some conservative news. There may be some conservative cable networks that you can get some conservative news. But even that, be on guard. But if you listen to the wrong people, the panic comes because they listen to the wrong people. There are folks out of church today that they got out of church because they listened to the wrong people. And there was panic or whatever was going on, and they just fell apart, got out of church. That's not, they're listening to the wrong people, right? Number one, they listen to the wrong people. They listen to the 10 instead of 2. Number 2, the next thing that happens is people get mad and blame godly leaders. Now, Moses had gotten the people 10 plagues, and the last one being the blood on the door of the firstborn dying. They get out of Egypt wealthy beyond their wildest imaginations. They've got all this wealth. They cross the Red Sea. Their enemy is drowned. God gives them fresh water out of the place called Marah, manna from heaven. They get to the Mount Sinai. They're there for a year. God feeds them every day. God clothes them. They hear from God. They hear the voice of God, see the lightning and the thunder and Moses and Joshua up in the mountain and all. They have seen God provide. They complained wanting meat, and God gave them quail till it says it came out their nose. You felt that way at Thanksgiving, I'm sure, or Christmas. And but you know what? Number one, they listen to the wrong people. Number 2, they blame godly leaders. What had Moses and Aaron ever done to deserve the lack of trust? And it says there, all in verse 1, all the congregation, verse 2, and the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. Moses and Aaron had proven themselves over and over and over. And it might be your spouse or your parents, it might be your boss, it might be whoever. When someone has proven themselves faithful year after year, decade after decade, don't be quick to lose your faith in them. And just don't let yourself be turned. First, you listen to wrong people, and then listening to the 10 were given the right report, the 2 were given the right report, 10 were given the wrong report. If you listen to the wrong people, then what's going to happen? You're going to find yourself blaming godly people. And then number 3, look at verse 3. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us, now they're blaming God, wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey. Number 3, they got discouraged and they made foolish and false accusations against God. They made ridiculous statements. There was no facts. Verse 3, wherefore hath the Lord brought us up to this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should be a prey. Nobody had gotten a splinter. Nobody had raised a hand against Israel. Nobody, remember, 40 years later, after they'd wandered in the wilderness, they come across to Jericho. Remember what Jericho was? Jericho was shut up because they were scared to death of Israel. How would they have been 40 years earlier when they just defeated the entire army of Egypt and crossed the Red Sea, how much more dread would the people of Canaan have had toward the Jewish people 40 years, half a century later? They were still in panic. Why? Because God made it that way. So number one, they listened to the wrong people. Number two, they attacked or they blamed the godly leaders that had never given them a reason to be distrusted. Number three, these discouraged people made foolish accusations and they made ridiculous statements. And I have heard this. I have heard people come up with the most ridiculous and stupid, and I can think of other words that are not even proper to say, ridiculous accusations toward people because they listened to the wrong people, because they found themselves blaming and accusing. And now, number three, these discouraged people, they threw around these ridiculous accusations. Look at verse 3. He says, our wives and our children should be a prey. They'd not had a problem. Now look at number 4. Look at verse 4. They decided they wanted new leadership. So, number one, they listened to the wrong people. Number two, they blamed godly leaders who've never given them a reason to doubt them. Number three, they begin to throw out these ridiculous, oh no, this is going to happen. We're all going to die. You know, if you don't get rid of this or if we don't run, we're all going to die. I've read in books or seen in movies, heard people say, this is our only choice. Oh, that's the dumbest thing in the world. How could one human being think they know all the options in all of eternity and they know the only choice? That is just really stupid. But I hear it and read it in books and different things, you know, in history and sometimes in novels. This is our only choice. We've got to do this. We have to do this. Probably not. But look at verse 4. They said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. They forgot all God had done. See, that's the next thing that happens. You listen to the wrong counsel. You begin to doubt and blame godly leaders that have proven themselves faithful. Number three, they begin to make these wild and ridiculous accusations. And number four, they forget all God had done. These guys, if they'd have just thought, remember when it was dark everywhere, but in our houses, in Israel's houses? Remember when the locusts ate everything, but nothing ate our stuff? Remember the water that was bitter, and God told Moses, put a tree in it, and the bitter water got sweet. You remember. See, that's why that song, Count Your Many Blessings. That's the right way to live. Hey, God's been too good to us. But what happens is we forget all the good things God's done. And God has been so good to us. Beyond words. Number five, you look at verse 4. They said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. Number 5, people want a worldly leader. People say, I'm done with this right-wing fundamental Baptist leader. I'm done with this dad who's so strict. I'm done with this job or this whatever it might be, and I'm done with this husband, this wife, whatever it might be. I am done. And they never turn to someone who's stronger. They never turn to someone who's got a higher standard of behavior. They always go down. Always. They go down. Why? Because they've been listening to the wrong people. Because godly people that should be trusted have been slandered and maligned, and because foolish and wild accusations have been made, and because they forgot all that God had done. Now, number 5, they're looking for worldly leaders. See, Egypt's a picture of the world. And so now, give us a leader that'll take us back that way, where it was good, where we ate the leeks and the garlics. Well, yeah, where you were slaves, where they were killing your children. That where you want to go back? What are you thinking, you knucklehead? But it all started with listening to the wrong people. And they'll get people. Folks will find a worldly pastor. That maybe they'll have a child go bad. Maybe they'll lose their marriage. Maybe they'll financial problems, whatever. And they'll say, I want out of this church. And then they'll go to a church with no soul winning and no standards and no holiness and no convictions, and because there's no pressure. You see, living for God is a life of denial. If any man will follow me, let him what? Deny himself. The biblical Christian life is a life of denial. It's not a life of ease. But people, when something goes wrong, the Chicken Little, the world's coming to an end, the sky is falling. And so then they go find a church where it's relaxed and easy and there's no pressure on them. And those 5 things Every one is a step down. And you read this, chapter 14, and the result of these things, then they wanted to kill Moses and Joshua and Caleb as well. And God said, let me just kill them all. Let them wander in the wilderness. And the children, they said, we're going to be a prey. I'll let their kids have the promised land. And so for 40 years, God fed them, God clothed them, and God took care of them. But for 40 years, they just wandered. One by one, they died until 600, 800, million and a half people died. A couple million people died. And when they're all dead, everybody that was over 20 at this time, when the spies were singing, everybody that was over 20 years old died. And then God said, all right, let's try this again. Now, the product of those 5 things is death to your spiritual victory. Now, I want to tell you, listen to the right people. Don't allow yourselves to go out and get mad at proven leaders, whether they be parents or bosses or pastors or spiritual leaders or whoever. Don't get discouraged and make foolish accusations. Number 3. Number 4, don't forget how good God's been. Don't forget all the things God's done for you. And number 5, don't turn back to the world, because the world is the thing that hurt you so bad to begin with. So let's stay right with God. Hey, have a great, great day. Thanks for joining us.